the engineering behind technology that turns casual use into automatic, often compulsive behavior.
It's really the mechanics of modern life. We're going to be examining the framework used by the most successful tech companies to, well, to manufacture habits.
Yikes.
And this draws heavily from fields like behavioral economics, consumer psychology, all that stuff. Our mission today is to pull back the curtain and really understand the structure that governs what nearly half of our daily actions.
Half. That's incredible.
Yeah, the things that are simply automatic, those behaviors that are triggered by situational cues without us even thinking about it.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit with some data that really sets the stage. If you own a smartphone, and I'm guessing most of you do, the research suggests that a staggering 79% of you check that device within 15 minutes of waking up.
That's before coffee, before anything else for most people.
Exactly. But the real measure of compulsion, the one that always gets me, is this extreme data point. Reports suggest 1/3 of Americans would actually rather give up sex than lose their cell phones.
And that, that isn't just a fun statistic to throw around. It's a profound indicator of how essential and how deeply integrated these devices have become to our psychological comfort.
It's not just a tool anymore.
Not at all. And we've seen this incredible acceleration in usage. If you go back to 2011, there was a university study that suggested people check their phones about 34 times a day.
Which, at the time, already felt like a lot.
It did. It felt huge. But you fast forward to today, and industry insiders estimate the true number is closer to an astounding 150 daily sessions.
150. Wow.
Yeah, we're engaging with our pocket computers every few minutes, all day long. And this isn't just convenience driving the behavior. This is meticulously engineered behavior.
In the old ways of engineering desire, the massive splashy campaigns from what we call the Mad Men's golden era of advertising.
They're useless now.
They just don't cut it anymore. They rely on expensive, constant interruption. But today, it's the small startups that are changing behavior. And they do it by guiding users through a series of experiences. And that series is known as the Hook model.
The Hook model is the central framework for this entire deep dive. It's a 4-phase process trigger, action, variable reward, and investment.
Okay.
And companies use this to manufacture habits. The ultimate goal, the thing they're all striving for, is what they call unprompted user engagement.
Unprompted, meaning you just do it on your own.
Exactly. Once a product gets you to that point, the consecutive hook cycles bring you back again and again, and the company doesn't have to rely on costly, aggressive, or, frankly, diminishing advertising campaigns.
So if the old model was interruptive advertising, the new model is embedded behavior. But, why are companies so determined to do this? To turn usage into a compulsive routine habit? What's the concrete business case for getting a user hooked?
Well, it creates these massive competitive advantages, which we can really boil down to 4 main points. The first one is the most obvious one, increasing customer lifetime value, or CLTV.
Right, CLTV.
When users form habits, they just engage more frequently and they stay longer. This increases the total amount of money a company can make from a customer before they, eventually switch to a rival or to stop using the product entirely.
And you see this really clearly in things like loyalty programs. A credit card company, for example, they might spend hundreds of dollars just to get one new customer.
A huge acquisition cost.
A huge cost. But they make that money back easily because the user is forming a routine around that single piece of plastic. And that results in just a very high CLTV.
The second benefit is that habits provide pricing flexibility. The famed investors, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, have consistently noted that businesses built around customer routines gain pricing power.
Meaning they can charge more.
They can charge more. As users come to depend on a product, they become significantly less price sensitive. They would actually rather pay a little more than face the disruption of changing their entire routine.
And you see this principle just perfectly exploited in the freemium model. Think about Candy Crush Saga.
Oh, yeah.
It was downloaded over 500 million times. They give the game away for free, but once that compulsion to play is established, they can convert those habitual players into paying customers, netting the company nearly $1 million a day.
A day.
Per day, just by selling power-ups and extra lives. The habit is established first, then and only then is the money requested.
And there's this fascinating illustration of this from Evernote's former CEO, Phil Libin. He called it the smile graph.
The smile graph?
Yeah. Evernote is a note-taking service. It's free, but it offers premium features for a price. After the first month of use, a mere 0.5% of customers were paying.
That's a tiny percentage. Most startups would probably give up at that point.
They would. Precisely. But the graph showed that by month 42, so over 3 years later, once the service had become totally integrated into the user's professional and personal routines, a remarkable 26% of those existing customers were now paying for a service they had been using for free.
Wow. From 0.5% to 26%.
The willingness to pay, it doesn't start high. It rockets upward only after the habit forms and the product has become indispensable.
So what's the third advantage?
The third one is supercharging growth. Hooked users are your best marketing department. It's that simple. Frequent usage creates far more opportunities for sharing, inviting, and spreading word-of-mouth referrals.
And the core accelerator here is something called viral cycle time, right? The time it takes a user to successfully invite another user to the product?
Exactly. If a user logs in once a month, they only have 12 opportunities a year to invite someone. But if they're logging in 150 times a day, the opportunities are they're accelerated massively. Increasing daily usage drastically shortens that viral cycle time, and that is what accelerates growth exponentially.
And that explains so much. It explains why Facebook, despite being a relative latecomer to social networking after platforms like MySpace and Friendster,
They weren't first.
not at all. But they were able to win. Their platform's design drove higher, more frequent user engagement, which led to a faster viral cycle time, and that just accelerated their growth past rivals that were already well established.
And that leads right into the final point, which is that habits sharpen the competitive edge. Habitual products are just inherently insulated from rival services. This introduces a concept called the 9 times better rule.
Okay, the 9 times better rule.
Innovations have to be dramatically better, 9 times better, according to Harvard Business School professor John Gorville, to shake users out of their old routines, especially if the new product requires a significant behavior change. Old habits, as they say, die hard.
That concept is best illustrated by one of the most frustrating pieces of technology we use every single day, the QWERTY keyboard.
Oh, it's perfect.
It was designed in the 1870s just to prevent early mechanical typewriters from jamming. That mechanical limitation is now a totally irrelevant anachronism in our digital world.
And we have superior, much more efficient keyboard layouts. The Dvorak simplified keyboard, patented back in the 1930s, is significantly faster and more ergonomically sound, yet QWERTY remains completely dominant. Why?
It's because of the incredible cost of switching. Right?
Absolutely. And the cost isn't monetary, it's cognitive. Once we acquire the skill of typing on QWERTY, switching to Dvorak forces us to relearn, which requires this massive, stressful cognitive effort.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Nobody is. The slight increase in efficiency you'd gain from Dvorak simply isn't 9 times better than the pain of abandoning a deeply ingrained habit. And that's the power of the competitive moat that habit builds.
So before we jump into the phases of the hook model itself, how do we even know if a product can become a habit? Where does the research suggest we draw that line between a product that needs constant advertising and one that can sustain itself?
That takes us to something called the habit zone, which is usually shown as a graph plotting 2 essential factors: frequency and perceived utility.
Okay, let's define those axes. So frequency is just how often the user interacts with the product, daily, weekly, yearly.
Right. And perceived utility is how useful or rewarding the user finds that behavior to be.
Okay.
When you look at the extremes, the contrast is really clear. Take Google search. It is incredibly high frequency. People use it multiple times per day. But the perceived utility of any single search result is, well, it's low in the sense that the result is only negligibly better than what you might find on Bing or another competitor.
But the ease and frequency just cement it as the default.
Exactly. The behavior becomes so ingrained that the slight effort required to switch to another search engine, even if it were marginally better, is just too much. It becomes a non-conscious routine.
Right.
Now, you contract that with Amazon. Shopping on Amazon is a much less frequent occurrence for most people than searching on Google, but the perceived utility is tremendously high.
It's the everything store.
It's the everything store. Users get great value and certainty knowing they will find whatever they need, even if they only visit once a week.
So the combination of high frequency or high utility, or I guess ideally both, is what pushes a product into that habit zone. But the critical finding here, and this is key for anyone designing a product, is that some behaviors just never become habits.
Never. Regardless of how useful they are, simply because they don't occur frequently enough. If you only use a product once every 3 months, it's always going to be a conscious, deliberate action.
It never becomes automatic.
It never crosses that threshold into automatic, non-conscious routine. Infrequent behaviors always require external prompts and high motivation every single time.
We should probably also touch on the common debate around vitamins versus painkillers.
Yes.
In business school, they teach you that painkillers are the essential products. They solve an immediate, clear pain. Vitamins are the nice-to-have aspirational products. And initially, a lot of successful tech platforms like Facebook or Instagram, they seemed like vitamins. I mean, nobody woke up screaming, I need to share a photo filter.
But the research suggests that they aren't just vitamins if they manage to stick around. The pain these habit-forming technologies solve isn't usually a physical or business pain. It's a psychological itch.
An itch.
It's a subtle, discomforting feeling that manifests in the mind boredom, loneliness, fear of missing out until it's satisfied. Using the technology provides relief, and it's always faster than just ignoring the discomfort.
I hate to admit this, but whenever I'm waiting in line for coffee, my hand just instinctively reaches for Twitter or a news aggregator to escape that micro moment of boredom. That's the itch we're talking about, isn't it? It's almost embarrassing how automatic it is.
That micro moment of boredom is the exact internal trigger they're designed to solve. And it leads to this profound conclusion that these technologies are actually both. They start as nice-to-have vitamins, but once the behavior is established, once you depend on them to fill those little micro voids, they become ongoing pain remedies.
Because the absence of it causes pain.
Exactly. The absence of the action causes a psychological discomfort, whether that's the stress of waiting or the fear of being out of the loop.
Okay, so with that context set, we can now dive into the 4 phases of the hook model. Let's start with phase 1, the trigger, which is the initial cue that sets the entire behavior in motion.
All right, let's start with a beautiful analogy for the origin of habits. Habits are like pearls. An oyster forms a pearl around an irritant, a piece of grit or a small parasite that gets into the shell, and it triggers the system to start coating it with nacre.
That irritant is the foundation.
It's the foundation. New habits, similarly, need a foundational irritant or cue.
So the trigger is the grit in the oyster, the essential cue. And it can be a really obvious sensory signal, or it can be something incredibly subtle and subconscious. And these cues fall into 2 primary categories, external and internal.
Right. External triggers are what most people think of. They're sensory stimuli in the environment that carry a clear call to action, either explicitly or implicitly telling the user what to do next.
The explicit examples are pretty straightforward. The classic thirsty sign on a vending machine, which prompts you to insert money. Or, in the digital world, an email notification from a service like Mint.com. They don't just send you the email, they put a large, bright orange log in to Mint button right in the middle of it.
And that design choice is so key. It's deliberately designed to reduce cognitive effort and reduce your choices. By reducing the available actions to a single, brightly colored click, they increase the likelihood that the desired behavior occurs quickly and, unconsciously.
Implicit triggers are even more subtle. They don't need any instruction. A website hyperlink cues a click. An app icon on your phone cues a tap. The information is embedded in the design and our learned behavior.
And companies use 4 types of external triggers to get this process started. First, you have paid triggers, like advertising, social media ads, or search engine marketing. These are almost exclusively for acquiring new users.
And they're totally unsustainable for repeated use.
Yeah.
As we said, Facebook and Twitter couldn't possibly afford to buy an ad every single time they wanted an existing user to come back and log in.
No way. Which makes the second type, earned triggers, also pretty unreliable for long-term habit formation. These are free favorable press coverage, a viral video, maybe a coveted feature placement in the App Store. They're effective, but they're unpredictable and very short-lived.
Third are relationship triggers, anything driven by person-to-person interaction. Word-of-mouth recommendations, electronic invitations, or social actions like getting a like or a comment.
These are absolutely crucial for viral hypergrowth. PayPal, in its early days, incentivized users to send money to their friends. Knowing the allure of receiving money was a huge, effective trigger for a friend to open a new account.
That's smart.
It is, but there's a critical warning here. Designers have to avoid dark patterns, tricking users into spamming their contacts, because that just erodes trust and diminishes the social currency.
And finally, the most crucial one for habit formation. Owned triggers. These consume your real estate. An app icon permanently sitting on your home screen, an email subscription, or push notifications.
They are the workhorses of habit formation, because the user has already granted tacit permission for the company to enter their attentional space. They prompt repeat engagement after the initial sign-up, ensuring the user is cued frequently enough, multiple times a day ideally, to really solidify the routine.
So those own triggers bring the user back repeatedly. But the ultimate goal is to evolve the user past needing any external prompt at all. The real prize is the internal trigger.
Yes. The internal trigger is where the action is cued automatically by a thought or an emotion originating within your own mind.
You can't see it, touch it, or hear it.
No. They manifest automatically in response to psychological states. And what's truly compelling, as the research shows, is that the most powerful internal triggers are often negative emotions. We are driven by the desire to seek relief from the itch of discomfort.
And those are the usual suspects: boredom, loneliness, frustration, confusion, or just indecisiveness. The product becomes the immediate solution to alleviate that mental stress.
Let's consider the student, Yin, who's used in the source material. She's compulsively hooked on Instagram. She's not just using a camera. She admits she feels this pang of stress, this fear that a special moment will be lost forever if she doesn't capture and share it instantly.
So that anxiety, that stress, is the powerful negative internal trigger driving her behavior.
It is. Or think about the feeling of uncertainty. What's the fastest way to relieve that specific pain? Google search. It's the instant mental relief valve.
Right.
Or checking email. For many people, it's not about work. It's about escaping mundane moments, or maybe validating one's own importance, checking to see if someone, somewhere, needs us. These associations form over weeks and months of frequent use, cementing the product as the default solution to that specific emotional pain.
And to effectively build a hook, a designer absolutely must uncover the user's frustration or pain point in emotional terms, not just in terms of functional features.
That's right. Because users' declared preferences, what they tell you they want, often wildly differ from their revealed preferences, what their behavior actually shows they want.
That's why we need a rigorous method to drill down past all the superficial complaints. And the 5 whys method, adapted from the Toyota production system, is perfect for this. You just ask why repeatedly until you arrive at the root emotion.
Take the example of Julie, the busy middle manager. You ask her why she uses email, and she'll initially say, to communicate with my team. Okay, why? To track project status. Why? To ensure nothing falls through the cracks. Why? So I don't get yelled at by my boss.
And then that crucial 5th why reveals the core emotional trigger.
Yeah.
Why are you afraid of getting yelled at? The answer might be because she fears being out of the loop and losing control.
That fear of being out of the loop, FOMO, or the feeling of losing control, that is the powerful internal trigger they have to design around. For Instagram, it's not a camera replacement. It alleviates boredom, it connects users, and it addresses the specific anxiety of missing out on life. The association between that emotional discomfort and the product is what sustains the habit.
Okay, so once that trigger fires, we move immediately to phase 2, action. The trigger is just a cue. It's useless if the user doesn't act on it. So how does the designer motivate someone to act immediately? Is it all about desire, or is it more about just removing effort?
It's overwhelmingly about removing effort. The core principle of the action phase is so important. Doing must be easier than thinking. The more friction, the more physical or mental effort required, the less likely the action is to occur, regardless of how motivating the trigger is.
And the research framework that governs this is the FOG behavior model, which states, B, it's good to me at. Behavior B only occurs when motivation M, ability A, and a trigger T are all simultaneously present and sufficient.
If the trigger is there, but the motivation is low, or the ability to perform the action is too difficult, the action just fails. You have to have all 3 of those components high enough to cross what he calls the action line.
We can use the classic example of a phone ringing, which acts as the trigger. If it's a telemarketer calling, your motivation to answer is low and you ignore it.
Right.
If the phone is buried deep in a bag, your ability to answer quickly is low and you miss the call. If the ringer is silenced, the trigger is missing entirely. All 3 have to be adequate for the desired behavior answering to happen.
And motivation is the energy for action. Dr. B.J. Fogg identified 3 core motivators that universally drive our desire to act, and they often appear as these opposing forces.
Okay, so first, seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. Second, seeking hope and avoiding fear. And third, seeking social acceptance and avoiding social rejection.
You see these levers used constantly in mass communication. The Obama Hope poster from the 2008 campaign was a massive success because it directly leveraged hope during a time of political uncertainty.
And conversely, those graphic public safety ads, the ones showing a person with a severe head scar after an accident, leverage intense fear to encourage people to wear a helmet.
And then there's the social acceptance piece. Budweiser ads, for example, they rarely talk about the beer's quality. They focus entirely on reinforcing social cohesion, good friends, good times, shared moments, associating their product with seeking social acceptance.
But even with a strong trigger and high motivation, if the ability is lacking, the behavior just stalls.
It does. And the principle of innovation here is ruthlessly simple. Identify the desired outcome, list all the steps required, and then systematically remove steps until the process is the simplest possible. Easier always equals better.
This trend is perfectly mapped out by just looking at the history of content creation online. Way back in the Web 1.0 era with sites like CNET, only a tiny percentage of people created content because the effort required, coding, uploading, it was immense.
Then came Blogger, which reduced the ability barrier, making it easier to register and post, which increased participation. Then Twitter arrived with its 140-character limit, drastically lowering the required mental effort or brain cycles to post.
And then finally, Pinterest, Instagram, and Vine simplified it down to just quick snaps and repinning.
And each time the complexity was dramatically reduced, we saw this massive increase in the percentage of users who are actually creating content online. The designer's greatest power is in removing obstacles.
So what are those obstacles?
Fogg defines 6 elements of simplicity. These are factors that influence how difficult a task is perceived to be. They are time, money, physical effort, brain cycles, which is the mental effort or cognitive load required.
Okay.
Social deviance, so how weird the action makes you look, and non-routine, how much the action disrupts your existing routines.
So the designer's job is to figure out what the user's scarcest resource is at that specific moment. Is it time? Is it mental energy? And then simplify the action based on that factor.
And we see simplicity in action everywhere. The option to log in with Facebook eliminates the friction of creating new passwords and profiles. But while it reduces time and brain cycles, it's a great example of complexity. For a user who's really wary of Facebook data sharing, that option might dramatically increase their anxiety, which is a form of increased brain cycles.
So the right simplification has to align with the user's comfort level.
It has to. Other examples of reducing friction are everywhere. Twitter's embeddable tweet button one-click, eliminating the cognitive effort of composing a tweet and finding the right sharing link.
Or Google, in its early days, ruthlessly streamlined its search homepage. It was this clean, fast experience that contrasted so sharply with the cluttered, information-heavy portals like Yahoo back in 1998. It reduced both time and cognitive effort.
And think about physical interaction. The iPhone camera, accessible directly from the lock screen with a simple swipe. That tiny reduction in steps gives the native camera a virtual monopoly for quick snaps, ensuring users capture moments easily and frictionlessly.
Or the design innovation of the infinite scroll, pioneered by sites like Pinterest. It eliminates clicks and waiting, turning browsing into this mindless, frictionless activity.
So when companies decide where to spend their budget on increasing motivation through advertising or increasing ability through better design, the advice is pretty clear. Always start with increasing ability. Increasing motivation is expensive, it often relies on interrupting the user, and instructional text is frequently just ignored. Increasing ease of use first provides the greatest long-term return on investment.
And speaking of the brain making things easier, the action phase is heavily influenced by our innate desire for cognitive shortcuts. These are called heuristics, right?
Yes, heuristics. They're cognitive shortcuts our minds take to make quick, often unconscious decisions that save energy.
We rely on these constantly, and smart designers definitely leverage them. One of the most powerful is the scarcity effect. We irrationally value items that appear to be limited, even if they are identical to abundant items.
The famous cookie jar experiment proved this. Participants valued cookies more highly from a jar that contained only 2 cookies than from an identical jar that contained 10, simply because the supply was limited.
And Amazon uses this by placing alerts like only 3 left in stock next to a product to influence buying behavior immediately, regardless of the customer's actual need.
Then there is the framing effect. The context or frame in which we experience something shapes our perception and even our physical enjoyment of it.
You can see this in the incredible story of the world-class violinist Joshua Bell. He played an impromptu 45-minute concert during rush hour in a Washington, D.C. subway station.
He sells out concert halls for hundreds of dollars a seat.
Exactly. But in the subway, he was largely ignored. The framing, the context of the subway versus the concert hall changed the value perception completely.
And it's not just a perception change. There was a study where participants underwent fMRI scans while tasting wine. When participants were told the wine was expensive, the pleasure centers in their brains spiked higher even though they were tasting the exact same wine they had previously been told was cheap.
So the price tag literally changed their physical experience of enjoyment.
It did. Another crucial one is the anchoring effect. This is when our judgment is disproportionately influenced by the first piece of information we receive, the anchor, preventing us from making fully rational decisions later on.
You see this constantly in retail. If you see a package of 10 socks priced at $25 and a package of 5 socks next to it priced at $10, that $25 price point is the anchor. Many people stop calculating the per unit price because $10 just sounds so much cheaper than $25, even though the $10 package is more expensive per pair of socks. The anchor prevents them from doing the necessary math.
And finally, there's the endowed progress effect. Our motivation increases dramatically when people believe they are nearing a goal. This is why loyalty programs often give you a false head start.
Like the classic punch card experiment. Customers were given loyalty cards. One group got a blank card requiring 10 stamps. The other group got a 12-stamp card, but with 2 stamps already punched for free.
So both groups had 10 purchases remaining.
Exactly the same amount of work. But the group that felt they were already underway had an 82% higher completion rate.
LinkedIn uses this perfectly with its profile strength bar. Users start with some progress, they feel endowed. The bar incrementally advances as they fill out sections, giving them a constant sense of momentum toward completion, even though functionally, a LinkedIn profile is never truly finished.
And that desire for progress, coupled with the uncertainty of what reward comes next, is exactly what propels us into the third phase.
Phase 3. Variable reward, the part that creates craving.
Right.
To understand variable rewards, you have to look inside the neurobiology of craving. Early experiments by Olds and Milner involved implanting electrodes in the brains of lab mice, allowing them to self-stimulate their nucleus accumbens just by tapping a lever.
And they initially thought they had discovered the brain's pleasure center, right, because the mice would tap the lever compulsively, sometimes until they were exhausted.
They did. But later, more refined research, like the Knudsen study on human gambling, revealed a critical distinction. The nucleus accumbens, the craving center, it activates not when the reward is received, the moment of pleasure, but in anticipation of it. It's the stress of desire, the wanting, that compels the action.
So predictable feedback loops, like the predictable ding of your oven timer or the fridge light turning on, they don't create desire.
Not at all. But you add variability, and suddenly you create this intense intrigue and compulsion. That variability multiplies the dopamine surge, activating the parts of the brain associated with wanting, while simultaneously suppressing judgment and reason.
And novelty, the element of surprise, is key. Once a behavior is predictable, it loses its power to hold our attention.
Absolutely. If you think about children playing with a dog, they lose interest once they can predict all its tricks. Products have to maintain an ongoing degree of novelty to hold our attention, otherwise they just slip right out of the habit zone.
This variable schedule of reinforcement is rooted in B.F. Skinner's work with pigeons from the 1950s.
That's right. He proved that intermittent, random reward schedules dramatically increase the frequency of the desired action far more than a constant, predictable reward ever did.
And we can categorize these variable rewards into 3 overarching types: rewards of the tribe, rewards of the hunt, and rewards of the self. And the most successful habit-forming products, they cleverly combine one or more of these.
Let's start with rewards of the tribe, which are social rewards. These are driven by our deep evolutionary need for connectedness, for seeking acceptance, importance, inclusion, and status. This is the engine behind all of social media. Every post, every comment or share is met with an uncertain, random stream of likes or comments. It's variable social validation.
A wonderful example of this outside of traditional social media is Stack Overflow, the massive Q&A site for software developers.
It's a great one.
Users write these lengthy, highly technical responses for absolutely no money. So what's the reward? It's variable upvotes and badges from their peers. This confers status and respect within that community, intensely scratching that tribal itch for recognition and belonging.
And games have adopted this brilliantly. League of Legends successfully reduced negative player behavior or trolling by introducing honor points. Players could award these points to teammates for good conduct.
So it's positive reinforcement.
Exactly. The variable nature of receiving these kudos and the subsequent status they conferred, which was often made visible, leveraged social learning theory to encourage positive behavior, making honor a coveted variable status marker.
Okay, so the second type is rewards of the hunt. This comes from our ancient, hardwired survival need to acquire resources, which is now modernized into hunting for information or hunting for money.
The classic physical example is the slot machine, which entices players with random monetary payouts. Digitally, we see this in the Twitter timeline, which is a stream of limitless, unpredictable content, a mix of the mundane, the infuriating, and the relevant. Users scroll and scroll, hunting for that next piece of relevant information, unsure when or if they will ever find it.
And Pinterest is the perfect visual application of this reward. They use the infinite scroll, but the images are often deliberately cut off at the bottom of the screen.
I've noticed that.
This glimpse of the unknown relieves curiosity and cues the user to scroll further, continuing the endless search for new, variable, visually intriguing objects. That cutoff is such a subtle design choice that maximizes the sense of the hunt.
The third type is rewards of the self. These are intrinsic rewards driven by mastery, competence, completion, and conquering obstacles. These make the user feel smart, capable, and effective.
This totally explains the addiction to video games, where leveling up and unlocking powers fulfills the player's desire for competency by showing clear progression.
And even incredibly mundane tasks like checking email are often driven by the intrinsic reward of seeking inbox zero, achieving that transient sense of completion and mastery over the chaos.
The now-defunct Mailbox app capitalized on this so well. It cleverly segmented emails into different sorted folders like Later or To Do to increase the frequency with which users could achieve that feeling of inbox zero. They engineered a feeling of mastery that traditional clients often lacked.
And think about learning a difficult skill like coding. Codecademy provides a powerful example of gamifying the difficulty. The user gets instant variable feedback and progression symbols, success or failure, as they learn. This turns a tedious, often frustrating path into an engaging challenge fueled by the intrinsic reward of gaining competency.
Now, a key point for designers, variable rewards are not like magic fairy dust.
No, they're not magic. They have to align perfectly with the user's specific itch. The failure of Mahalo.com is a really good cautionary tale. They offered monetary rewards for answering questions, but the rewards were too small and too infrequent to satisfy the desire for money.
So the incentive structure just failed to scratch the right itch.
Precisely. In contrast, Quora offered zero monetary reward, yet it flourished because it successfully offered social rewards, recognition, status, and validation from peers, which was a much more frequent and salient motivator for that particular knowledge-sharing community.
The second crucial consideration is maintaining user autonomy. Threats to our choices trigger reactance, that instinctive, powerful rebellion against being told what to do.
The research on compliance is so clear on this. Simply reminding people they are free to accept or refuse a request can actually double compliance because it neutralizes that natural human instinct to resist external control.
This helps explain why some health apps fail. MyFitnessPal's strict calorie tracking felt like an onerous obligation to many users who weren't already highly motivated calorie trackers.
Right. It felt like a chore.
It was perceived as a loss of autonomy, triggering reactance, and leading to high churn.
Conversely, the fitness app Fitocracy used community connection and social acceptance, an existing autonomous behavior, as the primary on-ramp to fitness. They maintained the user's freedom to choose how and when they engaged, making the process feel voluntary and enjoyable. The best habit-forming products are the ones nobody makes us use.
And we also have to be aware of the difference between finite variability and infinite variability.
Yes, that's critical.
Finite variability, like watching a new TV series or playing a game with clear levels, it becomes predictable and loses its appeal once the story is known or the mechanics are exhausted.
Zynga learned this the hard way when they tried to clone Farmville several times. The stock eventually plummeted because they were stuck in a hits-driven business model. Finite products require constantly pumping out new content to keep up with the user's insatiable desire for novelty.
But infinite variability sustains user interest because the experience is constantly refreshed by other users or content creators.
Like World of Warcraft, Facebook, or Twitter, the unpredictable behavior of other people ensures the experience never becomes rote, providing an endless stream of novelty and social rewards.
Okay, so that brings us to phase 4, the final step in the loop: investment. This is maybe the most counterintuitive phase because, unlike the action phase, which seeks immediate gratification and demands simplicity investment, is work the user does in anticipation of future rewards.
All right, so this phase actually increases friction, which goes against everything we just said about simplicity. But the timing is absolutely critical.
It is.
The investment comes after the variable reward, when the user is primed by desire and satisfaction. They're ready to reciprocate. Research has even shown that humans will reciprocate kindness and helpfulness shown by an inanimate machine or a computer.
Investment truly changes user perception. It transforms unfamiliar actions into deep-seated habits by leveraging three core psychological tendencies. It's a kind of rationalization loop.
First, we have irrational valuation, often called the IKEA effect. The more effort we put in, the more we value the resulting product or outcome.
This was demonstrated in a study where students who assembled their own simple origami creations valued them 5 times higher than identical items made by others.
And IKEA leverages this by having customers assemble their own furniture. Customers adopt an irrational affection for the furniture they built with their own labor.
Second, we seek consistency with our past behaviors. We feel this internal pressure to align our future actions with our past actions. And this is why small initial commitments lead to much larger ones.
The classic example is the neighborhood study. Residents who initially agreed to place a small 3-inch safe driver sign in their window were 76% more likely to later agree to place a large, unsightly, drive carefully billboard sign on their lawn.
Because that initial small investment led to compliance with the large, burdensome one.
Third, we avoid cognitive dissonance. If our actions conflict with our beliefs, we change our preferences to reconcile them. The fox decides the grapes are sour because he couldn't reach them, rather than accepting his own failure.
And we acquire tastes for unpleasant things like strong coffee, bitter beer, or spicy food because we rationalize our effort and change our perception to align with the enjoyment others seem to take in them.
The ultimate result is that users rationalize their effort. They change their attitude toward the product to be consistent with the time and energy they've invested.
But what is the practical structural function of this investment?
The investment creates stored value, which acts as that competitive moat we discussed earlier. It increases the product's value the more it's used, making the thought of switching to a rival incredibly difficult. And this stored value accrues in 4 primary forms.
Okay, so first, content. This could be user-generated or aggregated. Every photo shared on Instagram, every song added to an iTunes playlist, every memory logged on Facebook contributes to a digital scrapbook, a personalized repository of life that is incredibly difficult to leave behind.
Second is data. This is information collected either explicitly through forms or passively through behavior. On LinkedIn, every piece of profile data is an investment that increases your commitment. On Mint.com, linking financial accounts and categorizing transactions makes the service increasingly valuable and personalized the more data it collects.
You don't want to start that categorization process all over again somewhere else.
Not at all. Third, followers and reputation. This is stored social capital. Your Twitter followers or your eBay reputation scores are non-transferable assets. High-rated eBay sellers are far less likely to switch platforms, even if a competitor offers lower fees, because they don't want to abandon years of invested effort in maintaining a high-quality reputation score.
And finally, skill.
Right. Investing time to master a difficult, complex tool like Adobe Photoshop makes users profoundly less likely to switch to alternatives where their expertise won't immediately transfer. The increasing familiarity with the interface makes the action easier, driving them far to the right on the ability axis, which just reinforces the habit.
So, the most important critical function of the investment phase is to load the next trigger, reducing the overall cycle time. The user's past behavior initiates an external trigger in the future, seamlessly bringing them back into the loop.
Consider the Task Manager app, Any.do. The user's investment is connecting their calendar and giving the app permission to access it. This investment loads the next external trigger, a post-meeting notification that cues the user to return to record a follow-up task at the exact moment they are experiencing the internal trigger of anxiety about forgetting something important.
Kinder uses this brilliantly. The investment is swiping and matching. The result, the match, sends a notification. The notification is the external trigger, continuously bringing the user back.
And Snapchat is similar. Sending a photo is an investment that contains an implicit prompt to respond, with the self-destruct timer adding urgency and timeliness to the action, loading the next external trigger, the reply notification.
And Pinterest uses the investment of pinning, or liking, to give the service tacit permission to reach back out with a notification when someone else interacts with that content. It successfully loads the next external trigger and ensures the user returns to the cycle. It's an engineered, continuous loop.
It is. Which brings us to the really big question. The hook model is unquestionably a superpower. And as we often hear, if a power can't be used for ill, it's not truly a power.
Designers craft experiences to change behavior, and this can be used to improve lives or simply exploit attention. So it's a crucial question for anyone building products. Where do you draw the ethical line?
Innovators should use what's called the manipulation matrix as a necessary decision support tool before any product development proceeds. It requires asking two fundamental questions about the product's intended use and outcome. First, would I use the product myself? And second, will the product materially improve the user's life?
And the answers categorize a product into 4 distinct quadrants. The facilitator is the optimal position. You use the product yourself, and you sincerely believe it improves the user's life.
And they have the highest chance of success because they possess genuine empathy for the user's struggle. This is where organizations like Nuru International operate. Their founder, Jake Harriman, designed agricultural habits that required commitment but demonstrably lifted farmers out of poverty. He was scratching his own itch and the community's itch at the same time.
Then there is the peddler. They believe the product improves life, but they do not use it themselves. This quadrant is rife with risks.
Tremendous hubris and inauthenticity. This is often where things like gamified wellness programs built by people who hate exercise land. They think they know what's best for the user, but because they lack insight into the user's true motivation and friction points, the odds of success are just very low. They often build products that feel like work, not like relief.
The entertainer uses the product themselves, but does not believe it materially improves life. This includes most art, books, and games with finite variability.
This is a successful quadrant, but it's a hits-driven business. Products here, like the Zynga games we discussed, lack staying power because they rely on constant reinvention to satisfy the hunger for novelty. They are designed for distraction, not betterment.
And the riskiest quadrant is the dealer exploitation. They neither use the product nor believe it improves the user's life. They hook users solely to extract cash or attention, often maximizing short-term gain over long-term loyalty.
This is where products like some predatory subscription services or certain types of manipulative social gaming land. They have the lowest chance of long-term success and the highest moral risk.
Okay, so once an idea has passed that essential moral test, designers need to refine the hooks using habit testing.
Yes, an iterative process based on the lean startup methodology. Build, measure, learn. It helps clarify who your devotees are and what elements of the product are most habit-forming.
Habit testing involves 3 clear steps. First, identify the habitual users. You have to define what it means to be a devoted user. For example, visits 5 times a day for a social app, or once a week for a financial tracking site. A suggested benchmark is that at least 5% of your user base meets this usage threshold.
Second, codify. You sift through the behavioral data to find the habit path, the specific series of similar actions taken by your most loyal users during their first few engagements. This is where you find the tipping point.
For example, Twitter discovered that new users who followed 30 others hit a tipping point that dramatically increased their likelihood of staying engaged and becoming loyal, compared to those who followed fewer people. And that finding turns into a clear design mandate.
Which is the third step, modify. Armed with that specific insight, you update the product's onboarding flow to nudge new users down that successful codified habit path. Twitter updated its sign-up process to strongly encourage new users to immediately follow people based on the actions of their most devoted users.
So the final area for designers looking for new opportunities is to look outward. The research suggests 3 places where new habit-forming products tend to emerge. First, look inward. The personal itch. Build what you sincerely wish someone else would solve for you.
Joel Gascoigne, the founder of Buffer, did exactly this. He recognized his own need to schedule tweets X times per day easily, rather than choosing exact times, and he built a simpler solution for himself. Careful introspection often uncovers breakthrough habit-forming opportunities that others missed.
Second, look for nascent behaviors. These are small, niche behaviors that eventually fulfill a mass-market need.
Like Facebook starting only with Harvard students, mimicking an offline established social behavior perusing a physical yearbook before it expanded globally. Early skepticism dismissed the telephone and the internet itself as just toys or niche novelties.
And third, look at enabling technologies and interface changes. Every new infrastructure or platform creates new opportunities to make a behavior easier and more rewarding.
Mobile cameras and faster data networks enabled Instagram's success, and its low-tech filters simplified picture taking. New interfaces like wearable tech or mixed reality Google Glass, Oculus Rift, they promise the next wave of behavior change by simplifying actions in ways we can only begin to imagine today.
To synthesize this entire model, let's walk through one final fascinating example of a product that clearly uses the Hook model for a meaningful, high-utility mission. YouVersion's Bible app.
It's a great case study.
This app reached over 100 million devices and just dominates a highly competitive market.
And their mission is altruistic, helping people read the Bible, but their success is profoundly engineered using this exact blueprint. Let's look at the cycle, starting with the trigger.
So the internal trigger is the user seeking spiritual guidance, or maybe the fear of giving up on reading difficult scripture because of the immense commitment. The external trigger is the ubiquitous phone itself, which increases the user's ability to engage instantly anytime.
And they rely heavily on owned triggers. Daily push notifications, don't forget to read your addictions reading plan, and the red badges on the app icon. They also benefit from relationship triggers, as many churches encourage the sharing of the verse of the day and instruct their congregations to use the app together.
Next, the action phase prioritizes increased ability and simplicity. They make absorbing scripture frictionless by providing audio tracks and these bite-sized, chunked reading plans.
Right, that removes the intimidation of reading the entire massive book at once.
Yeah.
The principle is clear. Break down the overwhelming task into simple, manageable actions.
Then comes the variable reward. YouVersion delivers rewards of the self through mastery and completion. Finishing a reading plan provides a powerful intrinsic feeling of accomplishment and structure.
And they deliver rewards of the tribe through the social element of sharing the verse of the day with friends or social media, what we might call the humble brag effect, which is driven by the intrinsic reward of self-disclosure and gaining social acceptance for one's spiritual journey.
And finally, the investment phase accrues significant stored value. Readers invest notes, highlights, and their history of worship into the app.
This is the IKEA effect in action. The more the reader personalizes the digital text, the more the app becomes an irreplaceable personal asset, like a dog-eared physical book, making it extremely difficult to discard.
And the investment flawlessly loads the next trigger. By completing one plan, the app is giving permission to send cues and suggest follow-up plans, continuously bringing the user back into the Hook cycle. It's a perfectly seamless flow, connecting a human problem with an engineered solution.
Ultimately, you now have a comprehensive framework to assess the products in your life and, the products you might build. The goal here is clarity and understanding the deep mechanisms at work.
So the big takeaway is those 5 fundamental questions for building effective hooks that create positive, lasting behavior. What specific pain is the user relieving? That all-important internal trigger. What brings them to the service in the first place? The external trigger. What is the simplest action they must perform? The action. Is the reward fulfilling yet leaves them wanting more? The variable reward. And what work do they invest to improve the service and load the next trigger? The investment.
We are increasingly aware of the persuasive technologies that mold our lives and decisions. But as pervasive as personal technology becomes, society has yet to fully develop the necessary antibodies to addictive new things. We're still figuring out how to cope with constant engineered craving.
We've seen the blueprint for this immense power. The challenge for you is to use the manipulation matrix daily to decide if the products you engage with or invest in are acting as a facilitator, creating positive, enriching habits for yourself and others. Or if they are simply a dealer, exploiting attention for profit. Knowing the mechanism means accepting the responsibility of how you choose to spend your attention and how you choose to spend your professional life.